start by sharing a little bit of a personal introduction to the two of you, which I have actually not spoken to the two of you about. Very few people actually know that the very first meeting on whether Sattva should exist as an organization actually happened in Dreamer Dreams office. And it was actually facilitated by Vishal Talreja. And very young looking people, I remember were in that conversation, and I remember Vishal asking us, what do you stand for, how you are? So for me, a lot of what we are today, Suchetha, I owe to you. And honestly, the same would be true for the LSC as well. I remember the conversations I had with you when we were setting it up, where you had so much feedback for me on how to do it right. And it was incredibly valuable. And because a lot of why we exist today is because some of those conversations happened. And so thank you. And Geeta, similarly, I don't know if you know this, you were the first global foundation to actually support Sattva as well. The first conversation was incidentally on life skills with Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, and it's come a long way. So both of you as people and organizations, I think, have played a huge role in my life and in the role of LSC. So just want to start from this conversation, and what I thought we could do, given the stages had already been set with Mr. Kasturi Rangan coming in, to start from that macro view to get down to where are we today. And I'd love to sort of make this as interactive as possible. So I'm not going to hold the mic. I would love to point to a few people in the audience during this interaction as well, where I'd love to get your thoughts, and we'll make sure to make enough time for your questions. Yeah. Geeta, if I could start with you, one of the things that I think we've been saying through the day, and I'm hearing it more often now, is that we are at an inflection point in life skills, that it has now become more important. Multiple people also said, now we don't have to explain why life skills is important. Do you truly feel that that is the case today, that we've actually, if you take a 10-year view of this, are we really at an inflection point?
Maybe I split that into like the noise level, the budgets, the organizations, and then action on the ground. So definitely, I would say the noise level is much higher today. So we are at an inflection point, and I think we are at a very important point, because if we let this noise die without taking advantage of it, I mean, I think we would have failed. Budgets are also getting allocated for it. So I think the noise is there because people understand the why. People understand the why because employers have started asking for these skills. I mean, there's so much dialogue on future of work, etc. I also think while the employability skills got a very big boost pre-COVID with World Economic Forum and all talking about it, the social emotional skills, the mental well-being skills have definitely got a boost during COVID. So in some ways we are at a point where the ball is with, I guess, people like us to take it forward. So the budgets are there, the governments are allocating budgets. I think organizations are coming up, and we talked about a lot of younger organizations coming into the group talking about it. So I really think we have to create pathways for doing that, because what we've been doing for the last 10 years has had some results, but not the results we wanted. So we definitely need new thinking and action. In terms of is change happening? I would say we've not made as much progress in terms of tangibilizing life skills. I think we talked about the vocabulary, we talked about assessment, but really if we want this to be common parlance, for people to know how to act on it, we have to make it simpler, we have to define it, we need to let the teacher know how to assess a student. So I won't say assessment is the only thing, but you always need the from to. And until we make it easier for the teacher or the facilitator to say, this is what problem solving means. This is how you'll know that a grade 5 student is actually progressing on problem solving or on empathy or self-awareness. So I would say the tangibilizing, the how, and I think some progress thanks to LSC has happened on creating some of this vocabulary. And of course, there's NEP, that CBSE has its own handbook, several other frameworks. I think where we have the least evidence on is what models are working. So if we have to scale it up, we also need to know what models are working. So I think that was a long response, but I tried to split it that, it's definitely at an inflection point. And I think it's at a point where we can and we should take it forward, but there are a few things missing.
No, I think you set the foundation on a lot of what you talked about, younger organizations coming, assessments, what is working. I'd love to sort of double click on them as we go. And for me, it is also an important point because I've seen this in skilling, for example. When the demand is there and if our readiness is low, the amount of progress we make is always limited. But when the demand is there and our readiness is high as an ecosystem, we are clearly able to jump a few hops and say, hey, now can we redefine the paradigm and so on. And Suchetha, I know Dream a Dream started this journey way before anybody did, and you've been part of the Delhi work that happened and then subsequent states in Uttarakhand and so on. How do you see it? And I'd love to have you build on what do you think are necessary to move to the next level, to the point of what Geeta said, that what has got us here might not take us there. What are some of the areas that you think will take us to the next level as well?
Yes, I fully agree with you that I think we are at an inflection point, especially again if I were to contextualize in education, right? There were a lot of non-profits, including Dream that were working on life skills, but to make it a part of the education conversation of the country is that's where I definitely see that the inflection point is right now. Now is the time to make sure it gets integrated. So from that space, right, to have Mr. Kasuri and Rangan talk about it from the NEP point of view, from the CBSE, a central board talking about life skills. So that's all indications of how life skills is now getting integrated into the education space. And we are right now working, Dream a Dream, I know other non-profits are working in other states. And while the Life Skills Collaborative is doing assessments in 4 states for the life skills of young people, their well-being, their entrepreneurship and future readiness skills, we are also implementing life skills-based curriculums in 5 different states. So Delhi, Uttarakhand, Telangana, Jharkhand, Karnataka, they are all implementing different types of life skills-based education on modules or curriculum across the state. So in that sense, that's the inflection point. In terms of where we go from here, I think my submission to that is that even now, when we are talking about life skills in education, it's still considered almost like a add-on, a 40-minute class, something that you do if you're able to kind of, if the teacher finds time. Let's not assess it. It's anyway, almost giving the sense that it's a fun, different thing to do. But if you truly want to integrate life skills and make it mainstream in education system, then it must become the purpose of education itself. So we must go back to the fundamental question of, is education today preparing children for the adversity and the complexity they are facing right now in the world and the future they are entering? What are the skills that they need? Is education preparing them for that? Is education giving them the life skills so that when they come out 16 years later after they've gone through school, they're actually ready to deal with the challenges of life, to deal with a global pandemic, to deal with the climate crisis that they are entering, to deal with the political upheavals that are happening across the world, right? What skills are we building in young people to be able to do that? So when we are able to reimagine the purpose of education from that lens, then you will come to life skills must be a core aspect of what we're developing in young people, how we are preparing them. And then we would reach a much more, pervasive, a much more integrated and a much more robust education system based on life skills. And it doesn't seem like pockets that are happening and, everybody is just figuring it out on their own. And it's almost like a good to do, a nice to have, but not the critical, integral part of education itself.
Very, very well put, Suchetha, because I think the fundamental, and I think NEP is already starting this language on what is the North Star overall for education. Are we thinking about it right and so on? And how do we continue to further that conversation? Because sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back, and how do we sort of look at that and so on? I also I know some of our LSE partners have been working at state level as well, and I know Monal, you're on stage, and if somebody could get the mic to Monal. Monal, if you could look at it from the lens of Rajasthan, because Cavalier has been working with Rajasthan now for many, many years. How do you see it from a state lens and from the lens of how they are looking at life skills and so on? It will be great to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I think what we've experienced is that I just want to first say that Rajasthan has always been very forthcoming from the past also, around any innovations that need to be done in the field of education, right? So they've always, so they set up something which is known as Rajasthan Education Initiative, which is part of, which is run by the state, but they, under that they bring a lot of collaborators like us, and the idea is to bring innovations into the system, right? So that, you know, small organizations are not doing things outside, as a parallel, and rather, you know, it's inside the system. So I think the first thing is that the state has been very, very welcoming and forthcoming in general. And the second thing is that I think life skills as an idea has been dealt with by the government in multiple different ways in the past. You know, in their large scale assessments that they were running at one point, and you know, their own initiatives around isko kaise karna hai, that kind of a thing. So I think I just want to, I mean, I'm underlining this because I'm saying the state's readiness is essential. The other is that when we started our work with through Life Skills Collaborative, I think what we realized is that while the government is ready, really, how do you break it down to how does it go to the diets, how does it go to the officials in the districts, and how does the understanding of what this means as what does life skills mean, what does assessment of life skills mean, that needs a lot of, you know, talking around. And so an approach that we took was to we keep calling it capacity building, but really it's a lot of consultations and you know, conversations with where the experts come in from LSC, and the experts from the government also come in, and really those deliberations have help us you know, contribute in LSC, as well as help you know, build that with the government inside.
No, thank you so much, Modal. And I think the point you're making is very, very important. And I want to lead that to Geeta. A question to you is cascading something in the government system is an art in itself, right? The state is aligned, then how do you get the district? District is aligned, how do you get the block? Block is aligned, how do you get the teacher? Then the child, and then the feedback loop back to the state. And I think over the last few years, we've learned that in education very well. I think we've really done systemic work in education. You made a point, Geeta, about how the models of what works, you know, showing what is effective is important. You know, in education, we had this phase where we did a lot of experimentation outside and then brought it to the state. You know, some of it actually worked in the state, some of it didn't. Here, we are actually taking an approach of working with the state from the start. You know, when you look at that approach, how do you sort of see that, and what will it take for us to build these effective models of implementation? What are some of the prerequisites?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at some level we just need to have a much higher risk appetite. So I mean, you know, I don't know. We still don't know what works, and I don't think we will have one solution that works for everybody. So in some ways, we have to continue to do a lot of small pilots. So I think where we need the state buy-in is that these are important. They will be, you know, there's some common vocabulary around it. There will be some assessment around it. Teachers will be trained on delivery. But really, what is the type of training the teachers will get? You know, what are the type of activities we want on the field? I think there we need a lot more experimentation and evidence to come out to say, okay, you know, this is how we'll do. And I think we've been through that journey in education also, right? I mean, how do you group students into n-1, n-2 grade level? So similarly here, I do think we need much more experimentation on the ground. So just as an example, because in academic learning, you know, over the last few years, we've been very focused on working at the state level, you know, based on the learnings. But just at the foundation, I think what we did on life skills was last year we worked with the Yuva team, you know, took some of the assessment tools from Life Skill Collaborative, did a sandbox of about 15 pilots, 11 organizations, got based on which, and because they were the same skills and the same assessment tool we were using, we could get a directional sense of what pilots are working and what's not working and why not. So now we are trying to scale up some of those learnings, and just as an example, Dhanashri is here. So we are just taking the Magic Bus approach in that pilot in 2 districts of Haryana, doing the teacher training, cascading it down. And I just think we'll see where it turns out, because the pilot was small. If I'm not wrong, I think it was some 5,000, 10,000 students. Now we are taking it at a much larger scale, but yet we don't think we are ready for a state level rollout. So I think experimentation has to happen. And just as you were talking, Rathish, I was thinking, if I compare academic learning and integrating life skills into it, in some ways we are back at the point where the gurukuls of yesteryears are now translating into schools, and I think it's sort of an opportunity for us to say we don't want to take the factory approach to schools, right? I mean, if we had the Google Maps approach to school, to say every child has an individual journey, from to what, and everybody doesn't need to reach the same destination. So yes, I know that certain skills are important for me, but I don't need to be the best communicator. I don't need to be the best problem solver. Sometimes I'll be able to dial up something, sometimes I'll be able to dial down. But I have a basic foundational on some of these life skills. So yes, I mean, I think our experimentation will help us draw out that Google Maps. Assessments will help us draw out. Technology can help us a lot. But really the map is held by the teacher. I mean, the teacher or the facilitator, whatever we call it, does have a very strong role to play. And there is a very strong individual component of this journey, which may be slightly different from academic learning. But so, I mean, I don't want to complicate it. I think we still need to simplify it. But there will be a difference from the academic learning.
Yeah, and and I'm also thinking that maybe the new paradigm is where this gets blended. This
Exactly.
entire conversation,
Yes.
and again, everyone who has children have their own stories, right? My son recently had a test, with an academic test, where he had to get a score. He got more than what he thought he should, and he checked the scores, and there was a calculation error. And the assessment was low score but good ethics, right? So the scorecard actually sort of captures it. So that sort of is the picture of the child. The child is low score, good ethics, So it's sort of you're happy and sad at the same time. But what sort of gives you, gives me confidence is just the number of young organizations that are coming into the life skill space, right? I mean, for me, there are topics like mental health, for example, and life skills, where I think this idea of the fact that well-being is critical has captured the imagination of the new entrepreneurs who are coming in the social impact space, and they, sometimes don't read the book. So which means that they can try anything, and that sort of gives us a lot of innovation. I know Jigyasa is somewhere here in the audience. I hope she's still there in the audience. If she could sort of stand up and maybe share her thoughts, if she's here, or maybe you can just move to. Okay, no problem. Yeah, or even Labhya Foundation is here, so it will be great to hear. Which
Apni Shala.
Any one of you? They've all collectively stepped out, which is what young people do. Which is they don't attend sessions; they do cool things outside. So, but I'd love to sort of come back to you, Suchetha, which is yeah.
I didn't step out. I'm here. I'm here.
You're playing against stereotype clearly. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, Rathish, could you just repeat what you were asking?
So one of the things I was saying is there are more young organizations coming up in life skills. So the question that I had in mind was, what can we do to sort of enable young organizations to be able to scale and experiment more? Are there things that you wish you have right now? Hey, access to states, more risk capital, etc. That will actually enable you to try more things, dare greatly in the work that you're doing in life skills. So anything, now is your time to say, if this was there more in the ecosystem, will actually help accelerate innovation for all of us.
I think 2 things that come to mind for me.
Keep it closer to your mouth.
Sorry, is this better?
Fantastic.
2 things that come to mind for me, and I think that for Apni Shala, this is what has helped us in our journey of where we are today. One is, like you said, that there's a lot of the foundational work that many of these organizations, for example, I know that Dream a Dream and the mentoring and coaching we receive from them from what they have learned in their journey. I think that informed a lot of the practices that we now take into our organization and with our teams, and how we approach SEL with the schools we're working with. So that, I think, is definitely continual sort of access to these kind of networks where we can learn from the experiences of organizations that have done this for so long. The other, I think, which I feel like Monal mentioned this point earlier, and that really struck, is that the state's readiness or willingness has played an important role. And I think that as smaller organizations, to be able to get to that point where we can convince or have that willingness onboarded, when as small organizations, when we step in, I think it's a little bit more difficult to bring that collective voice. But if we have access to networks like this that then allow for the state readiness to be, yeah, I think that those are the two that stand out for me.
No, thank you so much for sharing. I also want to come to Akash. One of the things that is actually interesting in life skills is also, for me, it's a truly cross-cutting theme. It is there in education, it's there in vocational skills where you're working in, it is there today in conversations around, sports to arts to everything. How do you see this play out when you go to a state? And I know Quest works in the education space as well and the vocational skills as well. How do you see the life skills conversations play out? Does it play out differently in some form? And your experiences in engaging with life skills, Akash, would be great to hear as well.
Sure, thanks. I think we've spoken about mental health, we've spoken about climate change. I think the other key trend is the unemployment crisis that's staring at us. And while we are really, trying to focus on well-being and climate change, I think unemployment tends to be, when we talk about the purpose of education, is finding livelihood and meaning in life, and purpose in life also part of the agenda of the kind of skills that we want young people to have. So how do we really link learning with livelihood, and that connection or the interconnection between the self, the family, work and community is starts with sort of this idea of what do I want to be? Young people ask us this question, why am I studying this? What is the relevance of this? Even with life skills, when we go, the relevance question comes up. How is this going to help me in the future? So I think that one aspect about, what is the meaning of career, what is the meaning of work, is an important part of this conversation, I feel. And how do I really find information, experiences that actually help me connect the dots with my future self. Yeah. And I think that's a key component of the conversation, along with, of course, things like digital skills, digital fluency, which really give me an expression and a confidence to express myself in a world that is changing, in a medium that young people relate to. So I think using technology as a creative expression, as a means for problem solving, as a means for being a new ABCD, actually, in a sense. So that's another shift that we are seeing.
Absolutely. And it builds, Akash, on the point, Geeta, that you made, that when you put the child at the center, the child's journey becomes the path and the process of education itself. So it sort of brings me to you, Suchetha. One thing that I've always noticed is we have a deep mental model in education around literacy and numeracy. How we build it, what we can do, what is right, etc. And it's like I keep saying, education is the Harry Potter of social sector, right? Everybody loves it. Everybody puts money in it. So there is so much work that's been done. When we look at life skills, what are we learning from some of these experiences, and what should we be mindful of, which may be the wrong mental model to apply to life skills as well?
So what we're learning from the numeracy literacy, again, this is an opinion, is that how pervasive it became, right? For the longest time, it wasn't even about sending kids to schools. Kids were not going to school. They were working in the fields. They were working with their parents. That was considered education or learning for them. Then there came a phase of saying all children must go to school. And when the RTE came, we achieved almost 95% enrollment in school at the primary grade. And then it became they must at least learn to read and write. Right? So a pervasive drive that the whole ecosystem put about some things that must just happen for children. I think that's something we can definitely learn from the numeracy literacy space, because that was the power. It became a movement in itself, and today it's, nobody questions also why it's important, or how to do it also. In many cases, there's so much information, research, resources available for how you can do numeracy literacy for young people in all contexts, in different settings. So that's something definitely to take away. What we can learn in terms of not doing it the same way would be that, I'll come back to Geeta's point, that numeracy literacy is still, math is kind of still the same math. 2 plus 2 is same, whether you're doing it in Delhi, you're doing it in tribal Jharkhand, rural Jharkhand, or you're doing it in UK, right? Queenswell in UK. But life skills are very, very different that way. Life skills by definition are contextual. How I solve problems when I'm trying to choose a career in my life and I have to convince my parents that I want to be an artist is a very different life skill from, I don't want to get married, I have to, somehow stall this off. Is very different from, I'm 4 years old, my friend is not talking to me, how do I become friends? My parents are shifting homes, how do I manage this, right? So life skills by definition is very contextual, which is why the thing we must resist is the allure of standardization. It can get, standardization does make things simple, and it can be very tempting to say, can we have a standard measure of life skills for all children across the country? Then we'll know where India stands, and then we can compare India to the UK, and then we'll know, right, the state of life skills in the world. That, I think, is what we should avoid when it comes to life skills. We should be able to meet each child where they are at, recognize that every child has a different journey, needs different skills in different contexts at different times. And then we design, whether it's the assessments, the curriculum, the pedagogy, the teacher training, and the purpose of education, around something that's broad enough to hold that for our young people. Whether a young person is studying in a shelter home in Bangalore, run away from home, is studying in a shelter home, is in a tribal welfare school in Telangana, or is, in a Delhi public school in Delhi. It's so varied, the life experiences and the life skills they need. How can education be that container that can hold all of them and is not a one-size-fits-all, irrespective of who you are, where you come from, and what you want to become?
Thank you. Sort of leads us to assessments, because the joy of standardizing things is then you can assess it, measure it, etc. Vaijayanti, you're on the audience as well. You've spent 2 decades now in assessments, looking at it and across multiple waves in what has happened in education. You're with us in the Life Skills Collaborative as well. How do you see assessments and life skills play out, and how would it be different compared to what we've seen in education as well?
Yeah. So I will talk about the journey that I have done in the life skills space. I mean, people know for my work in the diagnostic learning assessments when it comes to, I think, MSDF knows it very well. 2005, Barun came, and the first time we actually started measuring and getting interventions to actually measure whether learning outcomes is achieved or not. So when we started looking into space, the first question we had is that, is it really possible, first of all, to measure life skills at scale? And the second thing is that, so we said that, okay, let us see whether it can be done. And so when we started that, we first did not know, what do you mean by life skills? So there's a plethora of like social emotional skills, life skills, 21st century skills, everybody calls it differently. And everything outside the academic space went into the space. So if we have to then figure out what are these to be measured, first we needed to understand what actually that is. And then go deeply. So we had embarked on a 5-year journey of researching. So we actually had people right from Belgium to people from who were coming here and sitting with us and even looking up Sanskrit suktis, Vedanta, and all the psychometric literature that exists, etc., to see whether it's really, first of all, possible to measure. So first thing that came out was that everything could be measured only in relation to self, and it should be like a self-report. So like, did you feel good today morning? How often do you feel good? That sort of a thing. So then we had to break that paradigm and say, no, it's possible actually to measure in a diagnostic way without that person really knowing what we are measuring. So we figured that aspect out, and we had brought in many of that into the Life Skills Collaborative also. But the first study which preceded that work was the cognitive and affective skill study that we did at scale, supported by Porticus, We actually did it across 3 states and 5 metro cities. We looked at government school children and private school children, etc. And that incidentally, that report is getting released on December 5th and 6th. There are 6 reports that are getting released. Each report is about 200 pages. The executive summary alone is 60 pages because we are talking about 5 different things. And it took us this much time to even get it all together. And the interesting part was we looked at parents, teachers, and students. So if you are trying to inculcate life skills, whatever we may call that, then it is important that it's not only the child who is responsible for that. Whatever the parent thinks automatically comes to the child, etc. And we have started making nuances here. So we basically figured out social skills and emotional skills are very different from what we may call as attitudes. So emotional skills is all about how do you understand your emotions, other person's emotions, relationship skills, or emotional regulation like behavior and affect. But in the case of attitudes, values, and beliefs, that's a whole range of value education which states are sort of progressing. Then you have to look at school climate. And then you also have to look at learning outcomes. The interesting thing we found was that all these things are having a predictor relationship to learning outcomes. So you are likely to see many such findings. As I said, it's a 2-day event. Invite all of you to register. Very limited space we have. We can accommodate maximum 100 people in the hall. Please register if you want to be there and learn from it. We have much to bring to this space.
Absolutely. So what she just told you is there's a lot of interesting things, but I'll only tell you if you come on December 5th and 6th. Thanks, Vajiti. I know, I'd love to open for questions, so you could be the first one, but please get started. Yeah. Can I? Yes, please.
My name is Dr. Heather Rizvi. I'm from Cavalia. Actually, when we talk of assessing the life skills, one of the things which we are missing and one of the very important way and method and tool of doing is the projective test techniques in psychology, in psychometry. So I don't know whether you are using that or not, but that is the most important and most direct way of measuring it. And there are certain very, very empirical and scientific, method of doing that. So I just wanted to supplement on that because you have to have a mixed method of assessing, this kind of skills. Thank you.
And assessment is a topic of huge interest for a lot of people in this room. So I'd love to, over lunch, hopefully have a bunch of you catch up as well. I just want to share maybe a quick observation of our conversation so far, but then open it up for questions. I know some of you have hands up. I hope we have enough mics in circulation. So just the conversation so far is interesting because it sort of gives us a sense of the complexity we are dealing with. We want it to be contextual. We want it to be personal to the child. We have multiple areas in which we are talking about life skills and so on. And we are fitting that into the state structure. But at the same time, it also seems like full of opportunity. Because there are so many young organizations, the enabling environment is there, the demand is there, the vocabulary is getting set up. I have a few more questions on this, but maybe we do a round of questions with the audience and then come back. If each of you could have a question that's brief, I'd love to sort of take a few questions and then take it back to the speakers. But please.
Yeah. I'm Vandana from Macmillan Education, and good afternoon, everyone. A bit of an outlier here because I see a lot of it as social sector. Well, we are for profit, but my question is around mainstreaming of life skills. It doesn't seem to be such a humongous task when the board mandates it. It has been in the curriculum, in the content, in the teacher training. But coming from a little marketing slant to it, why are we trying to make it such a push product with so much work on the ground? Is the social sector also working towards making it a pull by having work on advocacy so that higher institutes also value it when students come in, and then schools will probably give more focus to it and incorporate it rather than having an entire sector devoted to working on this?
Thank you. Maybe if there are other questions, maybe we can just take 2 more questions and answer it together. Yes, sir, you're in.
Thank you. I'm Paritosh Sehgal from Navsayog Foundation in Bangalore, and we work with children in the villages in developing life skills and creativity in them. So my question, actually I really enjoyed the conversation, and I want to thank Geeta and Suchetha for their views. In fact, we learnt a lot from Dream a Dream ourselves in the beginning of our journey. So really appreciate all the support we got. The thing that we found when we started the work was that the nuances are very different when it comes to developing life skills, probably in the urban areas. And it is a very different scenario when it comes to the rural areas. So maybe one of those things that we might want to be sensitive when we look at life skills development is this part.
Thank you. I know there are a few Quest Alliance hands on the back, and yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Deepika, and well, this question might be something that we would have heard a lot, but in a lot of what we are speaking is also what many of us have heard a lot, as to how things need to move, cascade, and from bottom to top, how do we do? And the best thing I think with collaborative of this sort is the kind of impact that it can possibly create at both the levels, at the central level as well as at the implementation level. So how about also considering, like, while all these strands on which we are working, how about also considering what are some of the prerequisites that are must for a system to even start working on something like life skills? And I don't think that it wasn't there, like NCF 2005 has beautifully integrated it. But there are certain prerequisites. A simplest prerequisite would be the student-teacher ratio, a basic infrastructure, the teaching service conditions, right? When a teacher is not treated well, how does that teacher actually engage with a child on their social emotional well-being or on their life skills? So if we can also work out, like, what are these some of the prerequisites which are really needed for any curriculum, be it on life skills or be it on any other curriculum, for any curriculum to thrive in the context where we are. So what would be this panel's view on coming up with something of this sort as a collaborative?
Thank you. I will probably just summarize the three questions once. One is the pull from the market is going to happen when the higher education system and potentially the industry starts to clearly highlight that, hey, life skills is important. The reason academic scores are important is because we know that the demand is some sense there. Is there an advocacy that is required at the higher education level, either with the government or with the institutions directly, that we should do so that the demand sort of sets off? So in some sense, then everybody starts to organize themselves around it. I think the second question is really the context being important, but rural, urban are very different contexts. How do we sort of approach it? The third question, a very useful question, is the state capacity always lags behind the intent and policy. And in the absence of capacity at the right level, a lot of execution becomes harder. Especially, in states like Jharkhand and so on, it's a much harder problem where there's a greater need for life skills. How do we sort of address that? I don't know if any of you want to take any of these three questions and share your thoughts.
Maybe I can start with the first one. I mean, I think the employers are clearly asking for different set of skills. So the push has started from the industry. I mean, the tech giants are saying throw away the paper degrees. New forms of universities are coming in. In the US, there's an alliance called Rework America, which is also really changing and orienting, corporates and interviewers to say, how do you go beyond academic scores to really test for certain skills in an interview? So I think that movement has started. My view is that if we, and it will percolate down, but unless we are equipping the government schools and the government school students to be, all set on life skills, we will actually create more disparity. The higher income students, the elite private school students will score much better on their life skills, and therefore, the job market also will get much more dominated. So there is a reason why there is a push, and I mean, the pull is there. But I think to create more equity, we have to create some kind of a push in the government schools. So.
Absolutely, 100%. Nothing to add to that. Should I take another question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So maybe urban, rural, yes. Like I said, it's very contextual. We must consider urban very differently, rural very differently, tribal very differently, low income very differently, mainstream schools, high-end schools very differently. So absolutely. When we think about life skills, we must think of it in context. And just to the previous comment, yes, it actually is not that difficult to assess. We do have like Vajanti and other experts here. So in that sense, not to make assessment a bigger monster than it is. It is kind of difficult, but it's not impossible. And we have cracked it. There are experts in this room who know how to do life skills assessments. I think I'll take the question from Deepika. So there's, when we brought it down to it, if there's just one prerequisite for this to work in the classroom, it is a teacher who's willing to be a facilitator. Because life skills, again, by definition, cannot be taught. Life skills is something you develop. It gets developed in an environment. It gets developed through experience. It gets developed. Like I can't turn up to a kid and say, tomorrow you'll be confident. I could tell them that tomorrow you will know 2 + 2 is 4. But I can't tell a kid, this is what confidence looks like and this is how you must come to school tomorrow. I have to develop confidence. So it happens in a field. It happens in a space. So we need a teacher who's able to do that, hold that, and facilitate the development of life skills. So that's a very core prerequisite, but very, very difficult to do. Not because of the teacher. We have actually had teachers who are able to do it very, very well, but the system needs to incentivize it. Today, the incentives of the teacher are still how many kids passed in 10th standard, how many got 98%, syllabus complete hua ya nahi. So we have to change the whole ecosystem to incentivize that relationship between the teacher and the student. And that for me is the primary prerequisite, other than many other things which would be nice to have. You wanted to add, Prerna, please?
Yeah, hi,
Yes.
thanks. Hi, I'm Prerna from ICRW, and thank you for that question, Deepika, because as part of the collaborative, this is exactly what we are working on. For the first time, and this is again an effort which ICRW has pioneered, for the first time, we have developed a tool for assessing the system's readiness and system's willingness to be able to take up and scale up life skills in the government schools. And what's very interesting, because someone asked a question about, is there a push or a pull? I would say there is a demand within all the interactions that we've had with our government stakeholders. It's very, very heartening to see that how they do understand the importance of life skills. And of course, NEP gives that framework for them to be able to say that. But along with that, there's also a very candid willingness to learn more. It's so beautiful when you go to these government officials and they very clearly say that, can you help me understand this a little better? And I think that is what is creating and generating the demand within the system. And we do have a tool now. It's not a perfect tool because this is the first time that ever it has been done globally. But yes, it is an effort to understand whether there are policy initiatives, whether there are, because while you want to invest in a teacher, there has to be budgetary provision for that. While you want to invest in that teacher, there has to be a training module for it. You have to have a training calendar for it. So all of that we are trying to assess through this tool. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, sir. Hello. Yes, sir. My name is Gaurav, and we are from RSCRT, Rajasthan. I want to set the context, for the question first. We have already set up the assessment cell in our state, and we are really pioneering in this area. And we are very enthusiastic about this initiative as well. But at the same time, we also face this challenge. As Suchetha has suggested that, that we still think that life skills are complementary to academic achievements. So I think it is something which we also face, in our state. So my question is what is the lag here? And where do we need that kind of mind shift? And how do we address that as a state? Thank you.
It's wonderful to hear that question from you. So I'd love to hear.
So many, many levels, right? Again, I wish I had a silver bullet, right? Just do this one thing. I really wish I had it. But if there was really this one thing, I would say it does actually come down to assessments. If you have a Rajasthan board or if you're with CBSE, right? There, I think there is need for some dramatic mindset shift around what do we really want, how do we know we were successful? Right? If we change that question about how do we know we are successful, is it their 10th standard, is it their math score, is it their science score, is it their 10th standard pass percentage, or did they develop conflict management skills? Did they develop problem solving skills? Do they know how to face an interview and get a job? Do they know how to think about a career? If we change that at the level of the system, especially around assessments and the board, that would be one silver bullet. But to do that, it needs mindset shift at every level, starting with political will. That's been our experience in Delhi, that starting with political will, going down to the teacher in the classroom. But that entire system has to start thinking about success and purpose very differently.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add to it. I agree, assessments is critical. And I think that's also starts sending a message to the parent and the community. I mean, just yesterday I was in, I think Raj is here, I was in a lend a hand school, and we were talking to students who had done internships, who were just so excited, the confidence, the communication, what they learned, all of that. But they said, no, we had to cut it short because we had tuitions, because grade 12 exams. So parents ne nahi jane diya. So, I mean, the ultimate success for them is how many marks you got in your grade 12. But I just think what we unlocked for those students in even the 2 week of internship was much better than what they would do in their board. But yeah, so assessments becomes fairly critical.
Of
And
success, yeah.
yeah, but I do want to just take back,
Please.
one point on the context. And I mean, I definitely appreciate these are individual journeys and these are from two journeys rather than, everybody getting 100%. But I mean, even on the academic side, context plays a role, right? Like if I teach a student 2 + 2 mangoes, what it is versus 2 + 2 pineapples, I mean, so similarly, I think in life skills, I mean, so it's not that we haven't traveled that journey. We've also traveled the journey of saying some students will be good in math, some will be good in history, some will be good in English. We realize the difference in students. So I do think there are things we can learn from that nuanced approaches that we've done on the academic side. This is much more complex, but I think baby steps towards it will be good. Like I do think, we may not get the perfect solution, but let's keep making progress, recognizing the differences that there are.
And again, for me, I think part of what was a question, but I'll preface it with a thought from my side. The role of collaboratives in some sense is to be able to demonstrate a blueprint of, hey, this is how it should look like. It might take a while to get there, but how do we do that, I think is going to be important. And secondly, I think the point we've been bringing up again and again, how do we truly blend this as a conversation? I remember once I spoke to this teacher, and she gave me this example that, she used to say, Fatima, the astronaut, has to travel to Mars, and this is the distance, and it was a math problem. And she said, while it is a math problem, that it was Fatima, who's a girl and a Muslim, who's an astronaut, does have an impact on the minds of the child because there's something they're questioning in the way they're doing that, And a lot of the ways we can integrate this into everything that we transact with the child on, where, it's much like parenting. Every transaction is an opportunity to share what the values are. I think that's going to be that imagination as an integrated approach, not as 1 hour in a day, etc., is going to be important. But sort of leads me to the question. I know this is the last question because we are out of time. And I know there are so many questions. You might have to catch them over lunch because I know Arjun is going to be very upset if I don't finish this on time. What is the role of collaboratives in mainstreaming education? Like there are some that are already doing, you are doing some work, we're doing some work. But if there is a wish list from your side of, I wish we do more of this, what would that be?
I would say more examples of what's working. So, I mean, I'm assuming our journey on vocabulary and assessment is over. So more data flowing back on how do you implement it? Because a lot of governments or boards are struggling to say, like, what should we do? So again, I think just more examples coming together, because again, they hear one organization in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. They also, and there are no similar views in this space. So I think collaborative as a platform where we at least agree on some basics and say, let's try this out for 2 years. There's some evidence, but we'll build out more.
The only thing I might say is that is the future. Collaborative, being able to work collaboratively, being able to work with each other, that is the future of the world. So we just, if you want to role model that for our children, we need to start with ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I couldn't take more questions. We wanted to keep it at time, but do catch them offline. Thank you so much for the wonderful engagement. Thank you, both of you.